My name is Kinsey. Welcome to Paradise Acres. We are a 200-acre farm, and we are recently switching to a method of agriculture called regenerative agriculture. So we're one of the first. Um, we're working on it, and there are very few in the county that are also. So I highly recommend looking it up. It's really interesting, and it could really transform farming and how we operate in the world. So we appreciate you all coming here today, and we hope you have a good time. We appreciate the Hub selecting Paradise Acres for this great event, and we're looking forward to hearing your stories.
Hi everyone, I'm Carla Sue Coast. I'm from Columbiana, and I'm going to be hosting this afternoon. And I'm going to open with a story myself. I am 65 years old, and I have had opportunity to live in community with a lot of different people and to experience community in a lot of different ways. And two of the ways was I lived in two houses at two different times with a bunch of women. And one was in Youngstown. There were 9 of us at one time living there. We were in a theater troupe that was touring the United States, and in between tours, we would live in that house. And the other one was in Columbiana, and there were 4 of us living in that house. And Celeste, who was one of the girls in that house, was the spider killer. So whenever there was a spider, whenever there was a spider lover is in our midst. Whenever there was a spider in the house, she knew the call. It was Celeste, and she'd say, "Where is it?" And she'd come in. I'd point to it. She'd get her tissue, reach up, get the spider, make sure it's dead, throw it in the toilet, and flush it. So one day, I was getting ready to do a bunch of dishes, and Celeste was outside. Our carport was attached to the kitchen. I was in the kitchen. She was washing her car in the carport. And I looked, and in a ladle in the sink was one of them big black hopping spiders. You know which ones I'm talking about? And I went, "Celeste!" And she said, "Where is it?" And I said, "It's in a ladle in the sink." So she comes in, and she looks in the ladle, and she sees how big this thing is. So she goes to the paper towels, and she starts rolling this big wad of paper towels because she sees how big it is. Reaches in, gets it, does her usual thing, looks at it, and didn't realize the spider was as large as it was. Took one look at it and went, "Wah!" and ran out the kitchen door with this wad of paper towels, threw them on the ground, and I followed her. And she's jumping on it, screaming and screaming and screaming, and I'm standing behind her, and we're both watching, and we both look up, and the postman was standing there. And she went, "It's a spider. Do you want to see it?" And he went, "No." And that is like my favorite story about Celeste. Skip ahead a few years. When Celeste was 33, she had 2 little boys, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and one night in her sleep had a massive heart attack. She was, I guess, dead for 20 minutes, and they were able to bring her around after 20 minutes, but she was in this weird comatose state where like her eyes were open, but she really wasn't responding to anyone there. I don't know a whole lot about that kind of stuff, but this is what I was told. And she was living in Lancaster, PA at the time with her husband and her kids. And we were getting messages from him of how she was doing and from her sister. And we really didn't, you know, Margie, one of the girls in the house, would go back and forth and try to see her, but, you know, it was kind of far. So what we did was we made a cassette because we all sang. We all led worship. We all, like 3 of us played guitar, 1 of us played keyboard, and we all sang at our church and everything. So we made a cassette tape of all the worship music that we would always sing together in the house when we all lived together. And Margie took it to Lancaster, and Celeste's sister said that at one point while she was playing that, Celeste's eyes were doing a little bit movement. She saw some movement in her legs, and she said, I thought for sure this was it. This was going to bring her out of this coma. Um, and then one night I had a dream, and I dreamt that I went to Lancaster to see her. And I remember in the dream I was walking down the hospital hall, and I could see her room, and I was expecting to walk into her room and see her in this bed in this coma. When I walked in, she was sitting up in a chair, and she had a big smile on her face, and she looked great. And I said, oh my gosh, you're awake. And she said, yeah. And we talked, and we had a great talk, and it was great. And then the next day I found out she had passed away. And I got to tell the spider story at her funeral, which her parents absolutely loved. They thought it was the greatest thing ever. So that is my little story about community. I have.
Tell me if you can hear me. I've got allergies and post-nasal.
Just get right into the
Get
mic.
closer to the microphone.
My story is not about community. It's about lack of community. I grew up in a little town in central Ohio, actually, and of course everybody knew everybody else's business. You know how that goes. But when I got married to a fellow biologist, don't ever kill a spider, by the way. We eventually went to teach in Ethiopia. On the way to Ethiopia, he had grown up in India and he really wanted to get back overseas. On the way to Ethiopia in Greece, I, the little kid from central Ohio, discovered that I was about to have a baby. And on our way to where we were going to be teaching, out in the sort of the wilderness area, we boarded a plane from Addis Ababa to fly there. That plane on the way, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, it would take a long time, but it was hijacked by a group called the Eritrea Liberation Front. And they were waving grenades. It was pretty scary. Eventually, they landed in Yemen, which isn't exactly the world's greatest place to land in either. And we managed, the man in front of us pulled a gun, started shooting at the hijacker. The grenade is rolling around. It was extremely frightening. But my sense of community was totally lacking. The only person that I knew and that Tom knew were each other. The plane, which was a DC-9, was filled with the most interesting group of people you would ever want to see from all over the world, really. Nobody knew anybody else. When we managed to run down the steps of the plane and get away, we were surrounded by, they had just had a coup in Yemen, and everybody had a gun, and they were waving them at us. They took us eventually into the airport lounge, and we were there for 3 days until the International Pilots Association said, if you don't let them go, we're not going to fly into Yemen. The Suez Canal was closed, so it was pretty serious. We knew nobody. There was a psychologist and his wife from the Peace Corps on the plane, and they fell apart. They were no earthly good, if I can put it that way. There was a dean from the college on the plane, but he had his 6-year-old daughter with him, and he didn't have energy to spare for anybody else. We could not contact our parents to let them know what had happened. They had no clue what was going on. We were completely cut off, really, from what we had always had, which was community. And I hope that none of you ever have to experience that. That was the worst, really, the worst part of the whole thing. The shooting and the grenades were bad, but not having anybody to turn to. I should mention, by the way, that the charge d'affaires for the Americans was the only way that we ever found him was that somebody told us that he was in the bar in a particular hotel. He was no use to us either. So we just depended on each other and on God to see us through. What I'm saying is value your community. Value the people who surround you with love, because when you're in a situation where there is none, then you realize how bad life can really be. Obviously, we survived, and our son survived, and we went on to have 2 good years, but we really did miss people. Thank you. And if you want to know the whole story,
The exciting life of that. And I was thinking about this morning, and I ran into the History Channel, and they had the Men Who Built America, the Frontiersmen, and it was all about Daniel Boone. And we hear that story hundreds of times, but yet, boy, it really hit home this morning. His sense of community was, of course, taking land in Kentucky, and of course, he had a fort, and of course, the Indians didn't want him there. So, that story went on, and man, the exciting life he had, running and escaping and building and keeping his community together and going after what they want. But yet he understood this was the American Indians nation first, and he didn't want to kill people. He wanted to negotiate, and I was really touched by that story this morning and realized how great and simple and easy and lazy we've become. To think of a frontiersman who had to do everything, down to making their own bullets and hunting for their food and salting it and smoking it and making it last for the winter, cutting their wood, all this stuff. So this is quite the time we're living in, despite how boring we felt the last 6 months because we can't do anything. Boring is good. Boring is good. So my friend Monica Striefler, if you all know her, which I bet you would, she asked me to do this, and then she jumped ship on me, so I'm going to tell a story about Monica. So I have the pleasure of being friends with Monica since high school and being very involved in her family, and I just am so honored that they're in our community, that they come to us and they stayed, and thinking of their history here, the Altamars, the Strieflers, they are just a great part of our community. We can all say how fortunate we are to have them with us. But Monica, of course, before she was in her accident, we were great friends. We she happened to come over to my house, which I was blessed to live in this beautiful neighborhood on McCloskey Road, and I even had a horse. That's the only reason I had friends, because I had a horse. And so Monica said, hey, I want to go for a horse ride. So this was not like any fabulous horse. This was just a little buckskin that my father and mom decided to buy me when I was maybe in 6th grade. And I had a lot of fun with her. And she was a stubborn old horse, but she did provide me a lot of enjoyment, a lot of memories. And this particular time, Monica and I decided to take a ride into New Waterford. So I heard people talking about how they got here. Well, if you head that way, which would be west, the second stop, you hit McCloskey Road. So that's kind of where I'm from. So we decided to take this horse, Monica and I, and we jumped on her, bareback, of course, because we didn't have money for a saddle. We just rode like the Native Americans. We were tough stuff. So we jumped on the horse, headed down McCloskey Road, and we ended up, I'm sure everybody knows, in New Waterford, the trailer park where Monica's grandma lived. And I remember so distinctly, we just rode the horse up to the door and knocked on the door, and we're sitting on the horse. And I thought nothing of it, because that's how you got around. I got on a horse and went to Columbiana. You might have seen me. I don't know. But so we knocked on the door. Her grandmother opened the door, big smile, all happy to see us. And so we had a little chat. It was fun. And then we continued on through New Waterford on this horse, bareback. with the both of us riding double. And of course, if you're familiar with New Waterford, we come down to the stoplight, and then to come back up to McCloskey, we go under that underpass where the railroad goes. Well, don't you know, I believe Monica was driving, but we're not. I don't know. I think that she claims I was. I can't remember. But regardless, we went under that underpass. A train was going by. The horse was spooked. She ran up that little bank. If you know, right when you come under that underpass is this bank. You can go left on McCloskey or right on Waterford Road. And Monica and I both just fell flat on our backs in the middle of the road. And the horse took off the wrong road. And we just laid in the middle of the road. Some old man just drove around us. And we just laid there laughing. Now, I did manage to get up and see the horse had crossed through 2 yards to get to McCloskey. She seemed to know where she was going, which was kind of amazing because we never really toured McCloskey much, or down in Waterford. So anyhow, I saw the horse was on the right track. Monica and I got ourselves together. We jumped up and we started heading back. So, of course, we live on the other end of McCloskey towards 14. So we had a little bit of a hike to go. So we're heading up the road, laughing the whole way, just kind of just dismayed. And I was not worried about the horse because she had done this to me before, and she always knew how to find her way home and back to the food source. So we ended up laughing and walking all the way home. And then sure enough, we were about a half mile from home, and our dear neighbor, Mrs. Kaler, she saw the horse running by, and she decided that there were a couple people missing, if not one or two. So she jumped in her, I remember it so well, the little gray Series K car, station wagon. She come up, she found us, and she just was so worried, and she's so protective. Here again, our great neighborhood, our great community. She got us in the car. We were still giggling and laughing about it, and drove us home to find Ginger the horse standing there eating grass like where you've been. So that is my story about Monica. I'm sure she would love to share it with you as well. And I'd like to know if she was driving or I was driving, if you ask. So enjoy your night. Thanks very much. This is very nice. Thank you.
This is community that existed at a certain point in time that reflected a lot of heritage in eastern Ohio, reflected from the migration of Germanic folks from eastern Pennsylvania. I'll just describe an event by the parts that came together. On Friday afternoon, Grandpa John would begin to work with his hired hand named Charlie, get the horse and drag out this big long tub, wooden ends, metal sides. They put it over by the old house. They would drag out big, tall tripods, big oak timbers about 12 feet tall, and set them up. They clean the old summer house out and bring in the buckets. They get out the knives and have them laid out. They get out the sausage grinder and have it ready to go. Grandpa John was a butcher, but also a farmer. Didn't have a butcher shop, but he had the old summer house, and he had people that would come up on Saturday morning early when the frost was. You wanted a cold day. You didn't want a warm day. The power of the blood wasn't so good on those warm days. And I'd be there with my sister Lori and little sister Joanne. We try to stay out of the way. But my mother didn't like us around those sharp knives and heavy animals. And hog days they probably do a hog and usually a hog or two and a beef. And at some point in the morning, the men would go off to the other end of the barn, and something would happen, and there'd be a dead animal. And they would put it up on the big old barn rafter and do the dressing out. They would take the hide off and take the innards out very carefully. My father learned how to do this. His father died when he was young, so he had to learn from his father-in-law how this butchering went. And one day, Grandpa John ended up with blood shooting out of his wrist. He had to go to the hospital, and there was my dad with a dead pig hanging there, and Grandpa John out of the way. So he had to figure out how to get the spleen out of that pig and not rupture it and destroy the carcass. And he managed that rite of passage well, and he was accepted into the family after that. I remember one time when the hog was out there, was all cleaned out. The big tub was for scalding, was to get the hair off the outside of the pig, and had to get it out of this hot thing and up into this tripod to hang there to cool. And as if you've ever been here, having a hog when it gets cool, the inside of it has this, it's a lot of meat, but a lot of these white things hanging there. It's white, kind of billowy things. They get kind of glistening. My sister Lori thought, I want to touch that and just see how that feels. And she touched it a little bit. I want to feel that some more. And she pushed it, and somehow she fell into the pig, and the pig fell on her. She's still traumatized by that. And it's a story that I remember seeing that, but it must have been awful because she still talks about it. But what I remember was more as the afternoon went on, and the pieces got smaller of the pig, and they grind them up, and they'd use the intestine that they'd wash out a couple times in hot water. That'd be Grandma Verdi's job. And they'd put it at the end of the sausage machine, and they put pieces in, and you keep nodding your head.
I've been to these.
And somebody had to grind for hours, and it'd squirt out the end, and sometimes the intestine would break, and they'd have to tie it off, and they'd start again. But the whole time, there was a big cauldron going of hot water, and all the parts you didn't want to package up and put in the freezer or chop real finely and mix with the cornmeal to make scrapple would go into the big pot. And it'd be boiling away and boiling away, and you throw all the fat in there. I mean, everything would go in there. And then at the end of the day, they scrape it off the top and make cracklings. And that was basically the cooked fat you got out of there. And pretty soon people would go home. But the people would come and just cut up things. Some people would do the wrapping. Some would do the sausage grinding. Some would watch the kids to make sure they didn't get hit by pigs. But it was a seasonal, every year this happened at the right day, and you knew when to come, and you knew who did what. And so there was a rhythm that was very common in agrarian societies, that you had to get things done. You had to get the pig fed, the pigs born, so that there was pigs on the right day. You had to get the knives sharpened. You had to show up. You had to do your part. And that was part of eating meat all the rest of the year, of getting canned meat out of the basement, out of those quart jars with the white fat sitting on it. But it was, for me, it was a wonderful time of seeing people I didn't know come together. So they did this probably for decades before I was around, but they knew each other, knew what to do, and they knew that if they kept coming together, this would get done. So that's a memory for me of community that got the pigs from the pen into the freezer in a fun way.
I've never spoken in public before, except in high school. And the last time I did, the nun, Sister Mary Godzilla, told me to go up in front of the class and read a paragraph out of a book. And I was so nervous, my knees shook visibly. My wonderful classmates, who would normally take glee out of a performance like this, actually felt bad for me. But that was 58 years ago, and maybe I've improved. I'm put in mind of a story about an old Southern Baptist preacher. And this Baptist preacher was in the habit of each Sunday, before he dismissed the, what do we call it, congregants, parishioners, or just churchies, okay? Before he sent the people out, he would tell them the Bible passage on which next Sunday's sermon would be based upon. So he went to the back of the church, which if you're on the outside is the front of the church. I've never figured that out. But he went to the back of the church to say goodbye to the departing worshipers and whatnot. Unseen by him, two mischievous boys went up to the pulpit, and the big pulpit Bible that the preacher uses there, they found the verse in question for next Sunday's sermon, and they glued the two adjoining pages together. So we fast forward to next Sunday, and our good old boy preacher is preaching right along, and he gets to the point where he has to read from the Bible, and he says, "And Noah took unto himself a wife, who was 100 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, and covered with tar inside and out." Well, he turns it back and he reads it a little slower, a little quieter. Turns it back and he's a little befuddled. And after about 15 seconds, he gets this bright look on his face and he says, "Friends, I've never come across this before, but I accept it as proof of the biblical assertion that we are fearfully and wonderfully made." That's my story.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. My name is Ebel. I'm from West Africa. I would like to share one story with you during this community. In my country, many of us we like to use motorcycle. We go everywhere with motorcycle because it is not like here cold like this. Like over in my country, they hard. Now one day, many of us we don't use the helmet. Like this is very very dangerous. But the government decide to send the police everywhere. Now, if the police see somebody without helmet, he might be arrested. Now there is a one guy with his girlfriend. They went somewhere. The leader of the police didn't wear the uniform. He just stay away somewhere. But the police, those police who wear the uniform, were somewhere and arrest people who didn't wear the helmet. Now, when that guy come, he saw the police. The leader of the police want to cross the roads, and he by accident with that guy. That guy didn't wear the helmet. He said, "Who are you? Why you didn't know how to cross the road?" He beat the leader of the police in the head. He beat him in the head. Police say, I'm sorry. Say, my dear, you see now, it's because of you. If not, I will slap him very well. It's just because of you. I say, I'm sorry. Now, he go ahead. He met the police. Police say, "Hey, oh, stop. Where are you going? You are going somewhere without the helmet. You and your girlfriend don't." Okay, stop. He wants to give money to the police to leave him go. The police said, "No, we don't like corruption. We don't like corruption. Now, he said, "What to do? Please." The police said, "No. What you have to do? Go to see go to see the officer." Who is officer? He said, "Your officer he's on the phone over there." He said, "Who?" He said, that guy over there. He said, "Wow, what to do now? We don't know what to do." He said, in the same time, his girlfriend say, he say, "Sherry, dear Sherry, Sherry, what to do? Let go, what to do?" He's trying to solve the solution now. and he cannot go over there. When he tried to see the officer say, what do you want to do? What can I do to you? He say, they arrest my bicycle, my motor bicycle, and they told me to come to you. He say, oh, wow, you told me that I don't know how to cross the roads, but now you come to me. What do you want me to do to you? And I say, no, there is no solution. Your bike have to go to the police station. Because of this, you have to respect everybody. If you don't need to know who is that person before respect him. You have to respect everybody in our life. If not, we can meet somebody that is very that we will need, but you have already give him the bad thing for. Okay, this is my story.
Is there anyone else?
You never know.
Okay. Well, are we done? Okay, we are done. Now, there was a sign-in sheet, and that's for if you want to come next time, is that right? So if you did not get a chance to sign that and you would like to, it's over here on the table. You guys have a great weekend. It's a beautiful one. Enjoy the weather, enjoy the foliage, because it's not going to be like this too much longer. And thank you for coming.
There are more donuts, more cider. If you want any, help yourself.